What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses walks onto a morning talk show expecting a pleasant, promotional chat, only to find herself ambushed by a host determined to tear her down? In just 46 seconds of relentless questioning, Lorraine Kelly would ignite a firestorm that ended with Kate Winslet doing something she had never done before on live television, walking off the set. It wasn't a tantrum, and it wasn't diva behavior. It was a woman pushed past her limit, responding to questions so invasive and so flagrantly disrespectful that even the studio audience began to turn against the host. This is the story of how Britain's self-proclaimed queen of daytime television crossed a line she could never uncross. Kate Winslet arrived at the studio that morning in high spirits. She was there to promote her latest film, a passion project she had spent years shepherding from concept to screen. Winslet, known for her grace under pressure and her refusal to indulge in Hollywood's shallow games, had done thousands of interviews in her decades-long career. She could handle difficult questions, uncomfortable topics, even subtle jabs wrapped in polite phrasing. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared her for what Lorraine Kelly had planned. The interview began normally enough. Lorraine greeted Kate with her signature Scottish lilt, smiling warmly for the cameras. They exchanged casual remarks about the weather and Kate's drive to the studio. Standard morning television filler, but anyone paying close attention would have sensed that something felt off. Lorraine's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her tone, though outwardly pleasant, carried a tautness beneath it. Her questions felt rushed, perfunctory, as if she were impatiently brushing past the niceties to reach something she had been saving. "So, Kate, let's talk about your new film," Lorraine said, leaning forward, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "You play a mother dealing with incredible loss. Very emotional material. Tell me, how do you prepare for a role like that when you have children of your own?" It seemed, at first, like a thoughtful question. Kate nodded, grateful to ease into a topic she cared deeply about. She spoke about motherhood, the instinctive love parents feel, and how tapping into that fear and vulnerability brought authenticity to her performance. "Authentic," Lorraine repeated, the word landing with a sharpness that shifted the air in the room. Kate's publicist, positioned off camera, straightened in her seat. Lorraine pressed on. "That's interesting you use that word, because there's been quite a bit of discussion about your authenticity lately, hasn't there?" Kate blinked, surprised. "I'm not sure I follow." Lorraine smiled down at her notes, a smile that looked far more predatory than pleasant. "Well, you've built your career on being the every woman, haven't you? The relatable star who speaks out about body image, Hollywood standards, unrealistic expectations. And yet here you are, looking absolutely flawless at 50. Some people might call that a bit hypocritical, don't you think?" The studio went silent. A ripple of discomfort moved through the audience. Kate inhaled, steadying herself. "Wanting to feel good about myself doesn't make me a hypocrite," she said calmly. "I've always been honest about my journey with self-acceptance. That doesn't mean I'm not allowed to take care of myself." "Oh, come on now," Lorraine said, waving a dismissive hand. "You don't expect anyone to believe you look like that without help. Botox, fillers, maybe a little nip and tuck. There's no shame in it. Why not just admit it?" Kate's jaw tightened. The camera caught every flicker of restraint. "If you're accusing me of having cosmetic procedures, you're wrong," she said, her voice still controlled but laced with steel. "And frankly, I find it incredibly inappropriate that you're trying to pressure me into confessing to something I haven't done. I'm just asking what everyone at home is thinking." Lorraine shrugged. "I mean, look at you. Not a wrinkle in sight. It's not natural for a woman your age." "A woman my age," Kate repeated slowly, dangerously. Lorraine barreled on, oblivious to the growing tension. "And while we're being honest, let's talk about your weight. You've fluctuated quite a bit, haven't you? Up and down, up and down. Some might say you're sending mixed messages, preaching body positivity, while clearly struggling with your own image." Off camera, Kate's publicist leaped to her feet, frantic, signaling the producers to cut to commercial. But Lorraine wasn't finished. "I have never struggled with my image," Kate shot back, her voice rising, the veneer of composure cracking. "I have struggled with an industry and a media culture that constantly tries to make women feel inadequate. That tears us down for not being thin enough, then tears us down for losing weight. That mocks us for aging naturally, then accuses us of having work done if we don't look haggard enough for their liking. And quite frankly, Lorraine, I expected better from you. You're a woman in this industry too. You know exactly what this feels like. Kate's voice was steady, but beneath it was a tremor of disbelief. She wasn't just angry, she was hurt. Lorraine Kelly, who had spent decades interviewing women from every corner of the entertainment world, merely scoffed, actually scoffed, on live television. "Oh, please," Lorraine said with a dismissive flick of her hand. "Don't turn this into some sisterhood moment. I'm just pointing out what everyone can see. You've built a brand on being real, but the truth is you're just as manufactured as every other Hollywood actress. You're just better at hiding it." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Several people in the front row shook their heads. One woman muttered, "That's too far," loud enough that the cameras nearly picked it up. Kate stared at Lorraine in silence. Something shifted in her expression, anger giving way to a cold, decisive calm. She reached up, unclipped her microphone and placed it gently on the table. "What are you doing?" Lorraine asked, her facade finally cracking. "I'm leaving," Kate said simply. She rose from her chair with measured grace. "I came here to talk about my work, to talk about a film that means everything to me, a story about loss, love, and the resilience of the human spirit. Instead, you've spent the last several minutes trying to humiliate me on national television. You've questioned my integrity, mocked my appearance, and implied I'm lying to the people who have supported me for decades. No, Kate, let's not be dramatic." Lorraine tried to laugh, but panic flickered in her eyes. She could feel the interview slipping out of her control. "I'm just having a conversation. If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you're not as strong as you pretend to be." That was it. The final straw. "Tough questions," Kate repeated sharply. "Tough questions are about my process, my craft, the themes in my work. What you're doing isn't journalism, Lorraine. It's bullying, and I won't sit here and be a part of it." She turned and began walking off the set. The studio fell so silent her heels echoed across the floor. Lorraine, desperate now, lashed out. "Fine! Run away then!" she shouted, her voice climbing into a shrill register. "Just proves my point, doesn't it? You dish it out, but you can't take it. All those speeches about being strong and real, and the moment someone challenges you, you fall apart." Kate stopped mid-step. For a moment, it seemed she might keep going, the dignified exit, the moral high ground. But Kate had spent her entire career swallowing comments like these, rising above, choosing grace. Not today. She turned slowly and walked back toward the host. Lorraine shrank slightly in her chair. Kate didn't sit down. She stood at the edge of the set, commanding the entire room. "You want to talk about what's real, Lorraine?" she said quietly, but her voice carried effortlessly. "What's real is that I've spent 30 years in an industry that chews women up and spits them out. An industry that tells us our worth depends on being young, thin, and perfect. I have fought against that narrative every single day of my career." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. "I've spoken up for women who don't see themselves represented. I've refused to let my daughters grow up believing their value is tied to their dress size or the smoothness of their skin." Lorraine opened her mouth, but Kate lifted a hand. "I'm not finished. What's also real is that you, someone who has been in this business for decades, just spent 15 minutes tearing me down. For what? For looking healthy, for being confident, for refusing to apologize for existing in a body that doesn't conform to your expectations." Her voice hardened. "You should be ashamed of yourself. Not as a presenter, as a woman." The audience erupted. Applause thundered through the studio, several people rising to their feet. Lorraine's face flushed deep red as she realized she had lost the room and the moment. "I think you're overreacting," Lorraine said weakly, but her voice could barely compete with the applause. "And I think you're a bully." Kate replied matter-of-factly. "You brought me here to create a viral moment, to make me look bad. Well, congratulations, you got your moment. But it's not going to play out the way you imagine." She turned to the audience, her voice softening. "Thank you for being here. I'm sorry you had to witness this. And to those watching at home expecting to hear about the film, I hope you'll still see it. It's a story about standing up for yourself, about refusing to be made small by people who want to diminish you. I think that's a message we all need." With that, Kate Winslet walked off the set, this time for good, leaving Lorraine Kelly alone under the harsh glare of the studio lights, facing a hostile audience and cameras that captured every second of her unraveling. Well, Lorraine said stiffly, trying to recover. I suppose we'll have to agree to disagree. Kate Winslet, everyone. Very, very sensitive this morning. But the audience wasn't buying it. The applause for Kate turned into loud, unmistakable boos, directed squarely at the host. The studio was still vibrating with shock when a man in the front row abruptly stood. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, amplifying his anger. That was disgraceful. He shouted toward the stage, his voice cracking with indignation. Without waiting for a response, he walked out, shoulders rigid with outrage. His exit became a catalyst. Several others rose, murmuring their disgust as they followed him out of the studio. The producers went into immediate panic mode. Headsets crackled as commands overlap cut to commercial, hold cameras 1 and 2, alert control room. But every option seemed risky. Anything they did would be replayed, dissected, immortalized online within minutes. Lorraine's face was pale under the studio lights as she tried to regain control. She looked down at her notes, but the words seemed to blur. Coming up after the break will be she flipped a page, then another. Her hands were shaking. Let me just check my notes here. But her voice trailed off as more audience members quietly stood and left. The sound of footsteps and rustling coats filled the studio. Lorraine's fingers fumbled with her papers, searching for something, anything, that could salvage the moment. There was nothing. You know what? She said finally, her Scottish accent deepening the way it always did when she was stressed. I think we should take that break now. We'll be right back. The instant the cameras cut, Lorraine yanked off her microphone so violently the cable nearly snapped. Without looking at anyone, she stormed off the set, leaving her stunned crew to absorb the fallout. The audience members who remained erupted into chatter. Conversations overlapped, some whispered, some furious. I can't believe she spoke to her like that, one woman said to her friend, shaking her head in disbelief. Absolutely uncalled for. The friend agreed. An older gentleman added, Kate handled it with far more grace than Lorraine deserved. Backstage, Kate was surrounded by her publicist and several crew members, some with apologetic expressions, others visibly embarrassed. Many insisted they had never seen Lorraine behave that way before, though Kate doubted that level of cruelty was a one-time event. You don't go from zero to that level of nastiness without practice, she muttered quietly. Her publicist squeezed her hand. Are you okay? I'm fine, Kate answered, and she was surprised to discover it was true. Actually, I feel better than fine. I'm tired of smiling through that kind of treatment. Tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. If people think I'm getting older and irrelevant anyway, I might as well say what I really think, right? Her publicist laughed despite the chaos unfolding around them. Well, you certainly did. Social media is going to explode. And explode it did. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation were circulating across every major platform. But the narrative was not the one Lorraine had banked on. People were not mocking Kate for walking out. They were furious on her behalf. Lorraine Kelly just committed career suicide on live TV. One tweet read, gaining thousands of likes before the hour was over. Kate Winslet is a queen for walking out. No one should have to sit there and take that level of disrespect. Another person wrote. A longtime viewer commented, been watching Lorraine for years, but after today, I'm done. That was vile. Even celebrities joined the conversation, praising Kate for standing up for herself and condemning the toxic style of morning television that hides cruelty behind the guise of tough questions. Back in the studio, producers huddled in a cramped corner near the control room monitors. The second half of the show was supposed to include a cooking demo and an interview with a reality star, but the atmosphere was beyond repair. Audience members looked distracted, unsettled. Crew members whispered anxiously. Lorraine had locked herself in her dressing room and refused to come out. We need her back on set in 5 minutes, a producer said, knocking on the door. Lorraine, please, we have a show to finish. I'm not going back out there. Lorraine's voice came from behind the door, muffled but laced with panic. Did you hear them? They were booing me. Booing me. In my own studio. This is supposed to be my show. It is your show, the producer said, trying to sound calm. Which is why we need you to go back out there and smooth things over. Maybe make a small apology, move on to the next segment. Apologize? Lorraine shrieked. For what? For doing my job. For asking the questions everyone actually wants answers to. The producers exchanged glances, tight, uneasy, and deeply worried. They both knew the truth. This wasn't damage control. This was career damage, plain and simple. the kind that got people fired. Nobody in the room had wanted her to attack Kate like that. Least of all the producer, now standing outside Lorraine's dressing room, speaking in a low, steady voice as though gentleness might somehow undo the damage. "Nobody wanted you to speak to her that way, Lorraine," he said quietly. "That wasn't interviewing. I don't even know what that was. But it wasn't okay." For a long moment, silence. Then the door opened with a sharp click. Lorraine appeared in the doorway, makeup retouched in the rushed, uneven way that only emphasized how shaken she was. Her expression, however, had hardened to a brittle mask. "Fine," she said curtly. "I'll finish the show, but I'm not apologizing. Kate Winslet is a professional actress. If she can't handle a little heat, that's on her, not me." The producer wanted desperately to push back, to tell her that doubling down was the worst possible move. But time was gone. The commercial break was seconds from ending. They needed her on set whether she was ready or not. When Lorraine walked back onto the stage, the applause from the diminished audience was tepid, reluctant, almost embarrassed. She lowered herself into her seat, plastered on a smile that looked more like a grimace, and pushed through the rest of the show. But everyone watching, both in the studio and at home, could see she wasn't really there. Her eyes kept drifting to the empty chair where Kate had been sitting, as if some part of her still couldn't believe the moment had actually unfolded on live television. During the cooking segment, she barely listened to the chef describing a simple pasta dish. Her questions came out distracted, mechanical. When the time came to taste the final plate, she took a tiny bite and declared it lovely. Though anyone could see she hadn't even registered the flavor. The interview with the reality star was worse. The young woman, who had arrived excited and grateful for the appearance, found herself speaking to a host who was mentally miles away. Lorraine's questions were vague, her follow-ups non-existent. At one point she even used the wrong name, something the old, sharp, attentive Lorraine would never have done. By the time the show finally limped to an end, Lorraine didn't bother with her usual cheerful sign-off. She simply muttered, "That's all we have time for today. Join us tomorrow," and walked off the moment the camera light faded. The fallout was immediate and merciless. By evening, millions had watched the exchange online. Articles and commentary proliferated across social media, dissecting the moment from every angle. The treatment of women in media, the difference between incisive interviewing and outright bullying, the strength it takes to walk away from a toxic situation, even when the cameras are rolling. Kate Winslet issued no statement. She didn't need to. Her graceful, decisive exit said everything. Sponsors began distancing themselves from the show. Viewers threatened boycotts. Celebrities cancelled upcoming segments, unwilling to risk being subjected to the same hostility Kate had endured. Lorraine, once a beloved fixture of morning television, suddenly found herself at the center of a PR disaster. The next morning, the show opened not with her usual bubbly greeting, but with a carefully prepared statement. Lorraine looked into the camera, her expression grave, and recited the words crafted by her legal and publicity team. "Yesterday, during my interview with Kate Winslet, I asked questions that, in hindsight, were inappropriate and disrespectful. I allowed my desire to create an engaging interview to cloud my judgment, and I crossed a line. I want to apologize to Kate, to my viewers, and to anyone who felt uncomfortable." It was polished, professional, technically correct, but noticeably hollow. She never acknowledged the specifics of what she'd done. The jabs at Kate's integrity, the comments about her appearance, the defensive hostility after being called out. Viewers sensed it immediately. It felt like an apology designed to extinguish a fire, not confront the truth. The controversy had done more than expose Lorraine. It had exposed the industry. Morning television, with its pastel sets, cheerful hosts, and cozy sofas, could be every bit as cutting and exploitative as the harsher corners of media. The friendly smiles didn't soften the invasiveness of certain questions, and the bright lighting didn't conceal the judgment beneath them. Kate Winslet had pulled back the curtain, not with press tours or accusations, but by refusing to participate in her own mistreatment. By calmly standing up, removing her microphone and walking away, she sent a message that reached far beyond that studio. It was a quiet but powerful reminder that no career, no reputation, no expectation requires a person to sit still and accept disrespect. It was a boundary drawn on live television, and millions applauded. The message was simple, but its impact rippled far beyond that studio. You do not have to sit there and take it. You do not owe anyone your dignity. You are not required to smile politely while someone chips away at your humanity for the sake of good television. You can refuse. You can leave. You can demand better. In the days that followed, that message echoed everywhere. Actresses, some veterans, some newcomers, began sharing their own experiences of uncomfortable morning show interviews. Many spoke of hosts who were warm and charming off camera, only to turn sharp, judgmental, or invasive the moment the red light blinked on. They talked about questions that had nothing to do with their work, comments about their bodies, probing inquiries about their marriages, insinuations about their parenting choices. All of it packaged as light-hearted banter. All of it designed to generate headlines disguised as harmless conversation. Kate's decision to walk away didn't create the problem, it revealed it. The interview had opened a floodgate, and the long, suppressed conversation that followed was overdue. Kate herself remained mostly silent. She appeared at her film premiere days later, radiant, poised, seemingly untouched by the storm swirling around her. When reporters inevitably asked about the interview, she offered them the softest possible answer. "I think everything that needed to be said was said in that moment," she replied with a calm smile. "I'm proud of the film, and I hope people focus on the work rather than the drama." But even without her speaking, the truth of her relief showed in candid photos. Kate, laughing with friends, looking lighter, freer, as though she had finally let go of a weight she had been carrying for years. The weight of obligation, the weight of politeness, the weight of knowing that, as a woman in the public eye, she was expected to be endlessly accommodating, no matter how intrusive or insulting the situation became. The irony was undeniable. The interview that was meant to promote a film about resilience and standing up for oneself had become its own living illustration of those very themes. Kate Winslet had entered that studio as an acclaimed actress. She left as something larger, a symbol of dignity, a reminder that grace does not require submission, a testament to the quiet power of walking away from someone who refuses to treat you with basic respect. Lorraine Kelly continued hosting her show, but something had shifted irrevocably. Her once effortless charm seemed more rehearsed now, her interviewing style noticeably softened. Gone were the pointed barbs, the sly digs, the subtle provocations. Whether this change reflected genuine introspection or simply fear of another public backlash was impossible to know, but the audience sensed the difference. And yet, despite her attempts to recalibrate, Lorraine could not escape the truth of what had happened. For 46 seconds on that morning, she had revealed something deeper than any scripted apology could erase. Beneath the warm Scottish cheerfulness and daytime TV friendliness was someone capable of casual cruelty. Someone who believed belittling a guest could be justified as entertainment. Kate, however, had revealed something else entirely. She showed that strength isn't always a heated confrontation or a sharp one-liner. Sometimes strength is the clarity to recognize a situation that diminishes you, and to simply stop participating. The most powerful thing she did that morning wasn't an argument. It was standing up, removing her microphone, and walking out. The interview lasted less than 20 minutes, but its consequences stretched far beyond that segment. It became a cultural moment, one that reframed conversations about boundaries, respect, and the treatment of women in media. It forced audiences to reconsider what they had long accepted as harmless morning show banter. It made people ask whether entertainment should come at the cost of someone's dignity. For Kate, it was a defining moment of empowerment, a line drawn publicly and unmistakably. For Lorraine, it became a cautionary tale about what happens when cruelty is mistaken for honesty and provocation for courage. Years from now, when people look back on Kate Winslet's career, they will speak of Titanic, of the reader, of the many extraordinary roles that earned her acclaim. But they will also remember the morning she walked off a talk show, rather than sit quietly while being disrespected. Not because it was the pinnacle of her professional life, but because it was one of her most important human moments. It was the moment she chose dignity over politeness, self-respect over visibility, truth over pretense. The moment she reminded the world that she was not an archetype or a persona or a media construct, but a person who knew her worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. Not even for 46 seconds, not even on live television, she walked away. And in doing so, she walked towards something truer, freer, and far more powerful than any segment could ever have offered.